Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing some cards I made using Paper Rose's Mystic Garden paper collection. This is an A5 size paper pack. There are 24 sheets, single-sided papers, and there's 2 of each design. I love all the beautiful patterns that are included in this paper collection, and the feather paper is my favorite. So there's lots of bright pinks, purples, some dark blues, there's a lighter lavender. There's also a few sheets that have cut aparts. So this sheet is full of beautiful florals and butterflies. There's a good mix of the busy patterns and lots of muted or tone-on-tone patterns. These work perfect for those backgrounds. The final 2 sheets have some more cut aparts, lots of sentiments, and more floral and butterfly images. Along with the Mystic Garden paper collection, I'm also going to be using some Paper Rose sentiment strips. I have a variety of different packs. This first set is called So Extra White 1.0. It's designed to go along with some of their word dies, but there's still plenty of sentiments that you could use on their own. So there's the black and white version. Here's a big and black white sentiment sheet, and then Uplifting Type paper collection. And I'm also going to be bringing in their black and white sentiment strips, which I've used in a previous video. So here are all the cut aparts. I fussy cut them all out. Took a little while, but look at these beautiful colors. I love using these images on my cards. Let's get started on my first set of cards. I will be making multiple cards with each design, but I'm only going to show the assembly of one. I'm using a card sketch from MFT. This is number 499. I have this fun pink spot background and then this pink marble paper for that smaller square. I'm going to layer that background piece on some black cardstock and then again on this dark pink cardstock. All of my cards in this video are American Standard A2 size, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. Most of my cardstock layers are an additional 1/8 of an inch to the measurements listed on the sketch. Now I don't always follow the sketches exactly, they really are there for inspiration. I have one of the sentiment cut aparts, a little something to make you smile. Before I adhere it to the card, since it goes off of that square on the right and left hand side, I want to make sure to keep everything nice and level. I'm going to put some small scrap pieces of paper just to keep everything nice and level. So I'm just using some liquid adhesive to adhere those in place. And I'm just going to hold it up to my card to make sure I have them in the right position. I'll add some more liquid adhesive to the back and adhere it to the front of my card. Now instead of those 3 circles that are indicated on the sketch, I'm going to use some of the butterfly cut aparts. I've already added some thin foam squares to the back side of them, so I'm just going to remove the backing and adhere them to the card. Starting with the largest butterfly and then working my way up to the smallest. For some finishing touches, I'm going to use some of Paper Rose's Clear Crystal Shaker Mix. These work great for shaker cards or for embellishments on the card. There are several different sizes included in the mix, so I'm trying to pick out at least 2 different sizes for this card. Then I remembered I wanted to add a couple of small banners in the upper left-hand corner. It just felt rather empty without anything. So I have one with some black cardstock and the second using that dark pink cardstock. Just cut a fishtail on one end. Use some liquid adhesive. I'll glue down the pink banner first and then the black one on top. And I'm also going to add a couple of the crystals on top of those banners. So after I lay out the crystals, then I can use my embellishment wand and liquid adhesive and adhere them to my card. And the glue will dry clear. I know you can see the little bit of white right now. So there is my finished card, and I did make a total of 4. I just used a different set of butterfly cut aparts for the second set of cards. And if you are interested in any of the sketches I show in this video, I do share all of that information on my coordinating blog post, and that link is provided in the description box below, or you can simply head over to KristieMarcotte.com. For my second card design, I'm using this fun farm border die by Paper Rose that has the barn and the little fence. The die is wide enough for a horizontal card, but since I'm going to make a vertical card, I didn't need to have the full length of the hillside, but it still worked out fine. I used some of that blue marble pattern paper for the ground and also the barn, so it has more of a silhouette look to it. For a little extra detail and also to anchor the sentiment, I'm adding a strip of black cardstock, and I did use Paper Rose's sentiment strip die set. I think this is the second to the smallest size, and I'll just trim away the extra. For the background piece, I used some of the pattern paper, and when it's turned vertically, I think it looked like a sky. It's real white on one side and gradually gets darker to that blue color, so it looks like clouds in the sky. I did cut it out using a stitched rectangle die. I just layered this on some black cardstock, and then I'll add it to my card front, leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Gives it a little extra contrast. So using one of the cut-aparts, this is Create a Life You Can't Wait to Wake Up To. I'm going to layer that on some blue cardstock that matches that pattern paper very closely. I didn't want it to stand out too much. Before I adhered to the card, I did add some scrap cardstock pieces above and below where that black strip is, just to keep it nice and level. I'm going to add a couple of the butterfly cut-aparts. These are the smallest size. I'm just going to put 2 of them flying up in the sky. And then to finish off the card, I'm going to bring in some more of the clear crystals. I love this clear crystal mix since it matches with all of the paper collections. So I'm going to put a couple of them around the butterflies, and then I'll add 2 in the lower right-hand corner. Just glue those in place, and there is my finished card. I did end up making a total of 4. I just used a different sentiment and butterfly cut-aparts for the other 2 cards. Now moving on to card design number 3. This is a very simple card. Wanted to make sure to use that large wreath cut-apart. For the background, I have some purple cardstock that has a slight shimmer finish on it. It's made by Basil. I'm adding a strip of purple cardstock to the background, but since most of it's going to be covered up, I'm just going to use these small pieces instead. I'm using the grid lines on my craft mat to make sure to get them in the correct position. So now I'm going to put some liquid adhesive on the back of this large wreath cut apart. And you could go in and cut out the opening in the center, but I decided not to do that. I'm going to add some more cut aparts instead. I'll put this panel on some black cardstock, and I'll put my card front onto a card base. And I won't have that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing since that wreath cut apart is very large. There's even a couple little ends that go off the edge just a tiny bit. So I'm going to use one more butterfly cut apart and also the sentiment thank you. I've added some foam squares to the back of the thank you, and on the butterfly I'm only going to put the foam squares on the outside edge of the wings, and then I put liquid adhesive on the body. That way it has a little extra dimension. Now I'll finish off the card with some more of the clear crystals. I'm going to put a few of them around the sentiment, a couple above the butterfly, and then a couple in the lower right hand corner. With such beautiful and detailed cut aparts, I didn't think the card needed anything more. I'll just glue those last crystals in place. And there is my finished card, and I did forget to put those 2 crystals on the bottom right hand corner at first. Then when I saw my other finished card, I remembered, so got those in place. So I did make a total of 2 cards since there's only those 2 large wreath cut aparts. So moving on to the next set of cards, I'm going to use another card sketch. This is Mojo Monday number 364. I'm using 3 different pattern papers. I'm going to layer all these pieces on this dark blue cardstock. I love how nicely those 3 pattern papers work together and still add some nice contrast. I'll add the black pattern paper with the branches first. I'm going to put it in the upper left-hand corner. Then I'll put my card front onto a card base, this time leaving that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Gives some nice extra contrast. Now before I adhere this white pattern paper, I'm going to put those scrap pieces of cardstock on the right hand side and the lower section where it goes off of that black pattern paper. Then I can add some adhesive to the back side of this piece and adhere it to the card. And I am following this card sketch fairly closely. For the sentiment, I'm using one of Paper Rose's sentiment dies. This is the word your. So it has the word and also the outline. And I use some white shimmer paper for the word. I'll add some liquid adhesive to the back side and then glue it onto that outline. And this has 3 different pieces. I'll add the R and the E, and then I can attach the apostrophe, but it's super tiny, so I'm going to use my embellishment wand to help pick that up. And then before I adhere it to the card, I will add a foam square just on the right side of the sentiment. So it's just going to go behind the letter E. Just trying to keep everything nice and level. I'll use some liquid adhesive to adhere it in place. Try to make sure to get it nice and straight. And for the rest of the sentiment, I'm using some of the cut aparts. So the whole sentiment will be "You're simply wonderful." I'm using liquid adhesive to attach the other 2 pieces, and I decided to put them at an angle. Then finishing touch, I'm just going to add some small stitch circle die cuts in the upper left-hand corner. Of course, I dropped one of them. Luckily, I was able to wipe away that glue mess. And there is my finished card. I did make a total of 4, just use some different sentiment cut aparts for the other 3. And I will have links provided in the description box for all of the paper collection and products I use in this video. Now moving on to card design number 5, using a sketch from Freshly Made Sketches. This is number 400. Had to use that beautiful feather, and it has gems on it as well. So this is probably my favorite card from the whole set, but do let me know which card is your favorite. I layered that feather pattern paper on some dark blue cardstock. Then I have the purple and white striped pattern paper. I just cut some thin strips since most of it's going to be covered up. So I think they're about 3/4 of an inch wide. I did add a scrap piece of cardstock between those stripe pieces just to make sure everything was nice and level. And you're not going to see that paper underneath anyway. So I'll put my card front onto a card base. Decided not to have the 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing this time. I was trying to decide if that feather paper had an up side, but I don't think it makes a difference. For this square that goes in the center, I used that purple pattern paper that has a little marble look to it. It'll be perfect for adding some of the cut aparts. So I have one of the sentiment cut aparts. This is Best Wishes. I'm going to pop this up with some foam squares. And then I have 4 other cut aparts, 2 of the feathers and then a couple of the branches, or maybe the one's more of a berry, I'm not sure. I did put some foam squares just on the top portion of 3 of the branches. So the bottom's all going to be glued down flat. And it'll still add that little extra dimension. So I'll just start adhering them to the left side of that square, layering them all on top of each other. I'll attach the sentiment before adhering that final cut apart. And then that little berry cut apart is going to overlap part of the sentiment. So now to bring out those clear crystals, start putting a few of them around the image and the sentiment. I'll put 2 in the lower left-hand corner. And then I think I forgot while I was recording this part, I also put 2 in the upper right-hand corner around the feathers on my other cards. So there's the finished card. I did make a total of 4. For the other 2, I used some different cut-aparts and the sentiment happy birthday. I really like how this card turned out, and you don't see purple in pattern papers very often. So now moving on to card design number 6. So speaking of purple, this is going to be another fairly purple card. I'm using the final sheet of this purple marble pattern paper for the background, layering it on that purple shimmer cardstock. I'll add my card front onto a card base. For the main image on my card, I'm using this beautiful heart die by Paper Rose, and I cut it out of that same shimmer cardstock. So it's a very detailed die. I'm going to put some liquid adhesive all around the outside edge and then just add little dots to cover most of it. I don't put glue on every single little piece, just enough so it's not going to pull away from the card. So I'll adhere it more to the right side of the card. Then I'll add my acrylic block on top just for some extra weight while it dries. Now I'll work on the sentiment. I have the die cut hugs. I cut it out with some white cardstock and then with some dark purple cardstock. I'm going to overlap the two, so you're just going to see a hint of that white behind. And I'll be adhering it to the left-hand side of this heart. I'm also going to bring in some of the cut-aparts, and I think these are moths, not butterflies. I'm going to pop them up using some foam squares. I'll put 2 of them on the upper right-hand side of the heart, and then 1 will go in the left-hand corner. Now before I adhere the sentiment hugs, I do want to add some scrap cardstock since it's going to go off of that heart die cut. And the easiest way to add those little scrap pieces was to just cut out part of the word hugs again and then just glued it right behind. So now everything is nice and level. I'm also going to add 1 of the sentiment cut aparts, so the whole sentiment will be sending hugs. And I did put a piece of double stick tape on the back side. Just thought it would be easier to adhere to the card since it was going on top of that fancy heart die cut. Now finishing touch, bringing out those clear crystals again. I'll put 3 of them around the sentiment in the lower left-hand corner and then 2 of them in the upper right-hand corner. There is my finished card, and I did make a total of 2. And this is another favorite card of mine. So now moving on to card design number 7. I'm using one of my favorite card sketches by OWH. This is number 123. It's been a long time since I've used this sketch, so I thought it was time to pull it out again. I have the white pattern paper with all the different branches. I'm going to layer this on some silver mirror cardstock, and then I'll layer that piece on some dark blue cardstock. And then I'll add just a little extra shimmer around the outside edges of the card. I'll put my card front onto a card base. For the smaller rectangle panel, I used the purple and white stripe paper. Also layered that on some dark blue cardstock. And then for the large banner that's on the left-hand side, just going to cut a fishtail on the bottom. And I just used some dark purple cardstock for that. I will add that scrap piece of cardstock to the upper portion of that banner where it goes off of the other layers, and then adhere it to my card. Now I'm not going to add that smaller rectangle that's included on the sketch where you could put your sentiment. Instead, I'm just going to use a sentiment die cut and also one of the cut aparts. So I have the word smile. This is another Paper Rose die that has the word and then also that outline. And then I have the you are loved to go along with that sentiment. I'm going to use a few of the floral cut aparts. Wanted to make a larger bouquet, so I'm adding a couple more cut-aparts to one side. And then I'm going to pop up this image using some thin foam squares. I'm using some of the larger squares and the smaller squares that are included in this foam dimension pack. I like to have the variety. Remove the backing and then I'll adhere it to the left-hand side of the card. Felt like one of the branches was pulling away a little, so I put a drop of glue just to hold it in place. Adhere the sentiment, and then on the "You Are Loved," I did cut the right-hand side at an angle just for some extra interest. Try to make sure to get everything nice and straight. Then to finish off the card, I'll add some more of the crystal gems. I'll put 2 in the lower right-hand corner, 1 underneath the flowers, and then 2 above the flowers, just to balance it all out. Use my embellishment wand and the Barely Art liquid adhesive and put all of those crystals in place. I decided the card needed a little extra sparkle, so I'm using a glitter brush and adding it to the sentiment word "smile." So it's hard to see in the video, but it does add a really nice shimmery glitter. So there is my finished card, and I did end up making 2. For the other card, I used one of the larger floral cut-aparts. Now moving on to card design number 8. I'm using a card sketch from Mojo Monday. This is number 551. I have 2 different pattern papers, and I didn't have a large enough piece for that full background panel, but just having these 2 smaller pieces and then a different strip to cover up that center, no one will ever know I didn't have a full piece. I will fill in this gap using some scrap cardstock though, just so there isn't that noticeable dip on the front of the card. So now I can add that pattern paper strip going across the center. I'm layering this on some more of that shimmer purple cardstock, and then I'll add it to some dark blue cardstock as well. I'm a big fan of lots of cardstock layers, if you haven't noticed already. I'll put my card front onto a card base, and then I can start working on the image and the sentiment. So using an oval die and also some pre-embossed cardstock, I have this large oval, and then I'm going to layer it on that dark blue cardstock oval. Add it to the center of the card. And then for those 2 rectangle pieces, I'm going to use one of the sentiment cut-aparts and also a large floral ephemera piece. I'll put some foam squares just in the upper and lower corner on the right-hand side of the sentiment, just to keep it nice and level. For the ephemera piece, I am going to pop up that whole image using some thin foam squares. Using the assortment of the larger and small pieces just to make sure to get good coverage. I don't want one area sagging at all. And then I'll attach it to the left of the sentiment. I felt that that floral ephemera piece was a little off balance, so I'm going to use another ephemera piece with the little branches and tuck it in behind, and I think that just balances it all out. I'll put a foam square so it'll still be at the same level as the other pieces, and also a little bit of glue just to make sure it's going to stay in place. So I think that really made a difference by adding that second piece. Now to finish off the card, using some more clear crystals, I'll put 2 in the lower right-hand corner. I'm going to put 2 below the floral ephemera piece and 1 to the left. I kept changing my mind where I wanted to put the other pieces, but after I lay them all out, I settled on that placement, and I think it balanced it out nicely. I did make a total of 3 cards using this sketch. The other 2 cards I used some pink pattern paper scraps and also used one of Paper Rose's embossing folders and some specialty cardstock for the oval. It added some really pretty shine. Now moving on to card design number 9, and this is the final card design. At this point, I only have small paper scraps. So I looked for a sketch that would work really well for all those different papers. And this one is perfect. So this is MFT sketch number 523. For this card, I decided to use the same pattern paper, and I layered it on some black cardstock to add some extra contrast. And that cardstock matted piece is 3 inches by 4 inches. It was the perfect size. By using that black cardstock piece, I found it easier to line up those pattern papers in that little window. I have some white shimmer paper for the background, and then I'm layering everything on some black cardstock. I'll put my card front onto a card base, and since most of that background is white, the black cardstock layer is an additional 1/4 of an inch instead of the 1/8 of an inch layers that I usually use. I have one of the floral cut-aparts, 1 sentiment, so this is Take Some Time to Rest. I'm going to put some scrap pieces of cardstock on the right and left hand side of the sentiment, and I really only needed teeny tiny pieces since it just goes off the edge a little bit. I'll add some liquid adhesive to the back side of this sentiment strip and attach it to my card. For the floral cut apart, I'm going to add some foam squares. Try to get good coverage. Then I'll remove the backing and attach it on top of the sentiment. Just going to overlap it slightly, not enough to cover up the words. Then finishing touch, pulling out those clear crystals. I'll put a couple in the lower right hand corner and then a few in the upper left hand corner. I'm putting them only on the pattern paper. I'm not going to put them on the white cardstock this time. While I was picking up one of them, I noticed there was 2 stuck together, so I had to remove that second piece. Then I can attach them to my card. Got a little extra glue, so I just wiped that away. So there is my finished card, and I did make a total of 9 since I had quite a few pattern paper scraps left over. So most of the cards I used an assortment of pattern papers, and then just a couple I used 1 pattern paper. And I was also able to use up many of the image cut aparts. I love finding sketches to really utilize the last of that pattern paper. Now here are all the leftover pattern paper scraps and also the leftover cut aparts. So I still have quite a few images and sentiments. I'll be adding all of these to my Scraps of the Year box. This is a challenge I decided to try this year, using all those leftover pattern paper scraps, and I'm also going to put those cut aparts in there. At the end of the year, I'm going to try to make some more cards using what's left in this container. So I think it'll be really fun. Might be a little tricky, we'll see, since it's going to be an assortment of different paper collections. Now here's another look at the 34 cards I made using Paper Rose's Mystic Garden A5 paper pack. In addition to the paper collection, I also used 8 sheets of 8.5 by 11 and 11 sheets of 12 by 12 solid colored cardstock. I love this paper collection. The colors and designs are beautiful. It's always fun to have included cut aparts with images and sentiments. So I didn't use any stamp sets at all. I do have links provided in the description box where you can purchase Paper Rose products. They are located in Australia and do ship internationally, but you can also purchase their products in the US as well. So I will have links to both in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.